You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you never completely get over the loss of your beloved. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up. And you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly, that still hurts when the weather gets cold. But you learn to dance with the limp. Anne Lamott. Welcome to the Lost Traveler podcast. I'm your host, Henry Cameron Allen. And today I have a very special guest who I have been wanting to have on this podcast from day one. And I'm glad we finally caught up with each other. Dr. Barbara J. Hopkinson of Massachusetts and the world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Barbara's the founder and CEO of A Butterfly's Journey and the Faces of Resilience Project, which I've been interested in since we connected. How long ago now have we?
Oh my goodness, Henry, it was before you went to Europe a few years ago. My goodness, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 years. I don't know what.
Exactly, I know. But we had an instant connection, and we never managed to get it together to collaborate yet. But I have a good feeling that we're headed in that direction. Tell us a little bit about, well, not only A Butterfly's Journey, but your journey. Where were you born? How did you get from there to here where you are now? I'm in brief. I know it's very layered and complex.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's see, thumbnail version. I was born in Bangor, Maine, but my parents were living in Newburyport, Mass at the time. And then they did what I think was one of the greatest things. They moved to this little barrier island called Plum Island, Mass on my 3rd birthday. And oh my God, what a place to grow up. 45 minutes from Boston, 30 minutes from New Hampshire, 45 minutes from Maine, 4.5 hours from Manhattan. But I'm on the ocean surrounded by lakes and rivers. And oh my God, I
love Plum Island. Love Plum Island.
Plum Island is amazing. So I didn't really realize it. I think I left and went down to New Jersey for school. And that's where I met my first husband. And that's when I realized what I had left. My mom said to me, because they bought a place that's all they could afford. It wasn't considered a good place at the time, or an upscale place. And she said, was it okay growing up here? I said, seriously, Mom? Yeah. I'm like, over the hill is the beach. Yeah, that's okay. So long story short, I fought my way back. When my boys were born and they were 3 and 1, I really wanted them to grow up near the ocean like me. I had. So I got them back up, but my first husband didn't really like sand. So he wouldn't move down the island. We built a house in Newburyport, which is an amazing bedroom community.
It is.
Just outside of Boston. But again, lots of visual and performing arts, great restaurants. Anyway, so we were there for 10 years. And then the whole neighborhood kind of changed from little kids. They all grew up, went off to school, and we're starting, over again. It was turning over again. So I convinced him, and we looked for 3 years, found a place on the ocean, which is where I live now and still do. And so fast forward, my 2 boys grew up. My older son went off to military high school at his own choosing, did wonderful. He was out at Arizona State University, got a scholarship, was on his way to being an Army pilot, when he talked a friend into switching vehicles and had a Rice Rocket motorcycle, which he was just starting to test drive, had not enough experience, and he lost control of it and lost his life. And that blew up my life, and it blew up my marriage. So a year later, my marriage fell apart. Before that, my 3rd son was stillborn when my boys were 6 and 4. Robbie was stillborn. And before that, I had a miscarriage. So now I've lost 3 children. I actually attempted suicide with a combination of my marriage falling apart and losing my older son. But it became a turnaround point. Luckily, I did it like with carbon monoxide, so it gave me time to think. And I realized I couldn't do that to my remaining son. So It became a turning point, and I started a local chapter of the Compassionate Friends to help a support group, which I still run 18 years later, for families that have lost a child, grandchild, or sibling. And then a few years after that, I got certified as a grief recovery method specialist and started a Butterfly's Journey, which was for broader grief. And I've taken that national and I've started to take it international. And that
Fantastic.
you will talk later, but it has three main components to it.
So how did you find Compassionate Friends? I've attended meetings as well. After I moved to Massachusetts from Minnesota a year after my son Cameron passed from brain cancer, I was looking for community. I was looking for some way to break through the isolation of grief, of intense child loss grief.
It's so intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
People don't know.
A friend introduced me to it, and it's funny because I had a lot of theater friends back then, which I think is eventually how I met you. But the theater friends were the ones that didn't run. People don't like to talk about grief. And most people, and now all these years of my working with bereaved parents, they all tell me that people run away from them in supermarkets. And I think it's not only partly because they don't know what to say, but I think they can't think about it in the context of their own lives. It scares the heck out of them. So
it should. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Overwhelming. I remember that feeling of going to the grocery store, and we were beloved in our Twin Cities community, and I couldn't go out of my house without somebody falling apart in my arms, or coming up to me with puppy dog eyes and weeping over my grief and saying things like, I lost my parakeet 2 months ago. I know exactly how you feel. And, bless them. I don't discount their pet grief, because that's also very intense.
Yeah.
A lot of people, feel that their pets are like their children, and they're searching.
Yeah.
They're searching for a way to relate to the profundity of your grief. And so I know it's easy for a lot of us to fall into judgment. How dare they equate my loss to their parakeet, right? But I got past that, thank goodness.
Yeah, me too. Because a lot of the parents that I deal with in my support group, and then I do these grief recovery method classes, and I have had people that come and lost like her puppy, but her puppy was with her for 15 years and she didn't have any kids. That puppy was her kid.
That's right.
And so I understood it over time. But a lot of the parents that I talked to and of my own, they didn't have that experience of people coming up to them and trying to be empathetic or compassionate. They would just run. They would just wouldn't talk to them at all, and they would avoid them, or they'd lose friends and family. And it was just so sad, because you need it and you need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Which is really, one of the things I'm doing with the Faces of Resilience. It's all about open expression, encouraging open expression around grief.
Your generous sponsorship and individual support of the Lost Traveler podcast benefits the Lost Travelers Club, a charitable project under the fiscal sponsorship of United Charitable, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. The Lost Travelers Club focuses primarily on the needs of parents who have outlived their beloved children. We recently launched our new Brain Candy Project wing, providing art supplies to children still struggling with critical or terminal health-related conditions. We hope to raise enough funds to launch Brain Candy, an arts and literature magazine created by and for these young people. Find out more at www.braincandy.online. Thank you. Talk a little bit more about that. Where was this idea born? So you take photographs of people who have experienced any kind of loss, or specifically child loss?
Yeah, no, any kind of loss. And so it's again, open expression. So I saw somebody doing photos, I think it was Dear World, but they were doing it related to like world events or traumatic, weather events, like Hurricane Sandy or Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
And I thought, oh my God, I need to give this gift initially to parents, because they don't get to express themselves because of what we've been talking about, especially when they've lost a child. Yeah. But then I opened it up to much broader than that. And so, and I tried to work with them for a while, but that didn't work out. And I said, I'm just going to take this and focus on grief. So I go to grief related events, And that might be, it might be the National Conference for Compassionate Friends or Bereaved Parents of the USA. It might be, we've done walks on the Capitol about overcoming addiction, vigils around addiction, Association for Death and Education Consulting, all different kinds of things that are just kind of related to loss and grief. And I encourage people to express, just come up with some sort of a phrase to express themselves, got to come from them. And I have lots of examples that they can see to spur ideas. But if they can't, I just give them, I ask them leading questions. And so I said, it's got to come from you. But once they come up with something they're comfortable with, and it might just be a name and a heart, I write it on their skin with a washable marker. And I love hearing the stories and having that connection with them. And then we literally bring a mobile photo shoot. It's got a big black, backdrop and lights and a professional, photographer. They sign a media release. We take as many photos as they want. And if they want to do singles, couples, families with pets, whatever they want, we take as many photos as they want. And then we edit them professionally and send them to them. So we email them the photos so that they can use that so it's a very cathartic thing for them to do it, because they're getting to express themselves viscerally. Right. And then it's a catalyst for them to talk about their grief with their family, with their friends, with anything. And it's so powerful. And I just love it. It's my passion.
Is there a website that has these photographs, or a coffee table book that people can buy to support the cause? Or how do we see these amazing expressions?
Right. So my website is abutterfliesjourney.org, and that's possessive, not plural. So it's FLYS. And on that is a photo gallery. There's three main things that we do for a Butterfly's Journey. And I'm just going to mention them, and we can talk about them, whatever you want.
And I'll put that link in the description, by the way, for listeners.
Okay, great. But anyway, there's a free resource center with hundreds of resources in 10 categories around grief. There is grief recovery method classes, which I have an advanced certification in, and that's the only evidence-based methodology for grief in the world. Wow. And that's out, there's information about that. And then there's a photo gallery with a lot of these photos. And then you click on it and you just see a description and a first name of the type of basically they're actually, there's tabs and classified by the type of relationship, the type of loss. And so people can go and see if they want to see that other people have lost to suicide, or other people have lost to addiction, or that I want to see people that have lost their child or lost their parent or lost their spouse. They can actually see photos according to those things. And again, it's all, about kind of open expression, but it's a butterfliesjourney.org, and then just go to the photo gallery. And on Facebook, there's actually a Facebook and Instagram, there is a Faces of Resilience page as well. There's a Butterfly's Journey page, and there's a Faces of Resilience page on both of those things. And I think for a Butterfly's Journey, I think I'm also on, I don't know, a few other things, Twitter and
yeah. Well, I'll put several links in the description, because I know that a lot, it's so important what you're doing, because it is a brutal kind of isolation that unless you've been through it yourself, it's hard to gauge how many people around you have gone through something similar, and to find that relatability. I think like you were talking about, a lot of people tend to bow out when you've experienced a major loss, like a child. People say, oh, it's unnatural, or yeah, I can get that your parents, that you've outlived your parents, but nobody should outlive a child. This is nothing new. It was perfectly natural for me to lose my son, because that's what happened. And he went in his way, in his time. If it was meant to be otherwise, it would have been. And so I'm here having to find balance. And if you can't find balance in your own community, where do you go? That's why organizations like yours are so vitally important. But when you're in the midst of that vortex of grief and loss and depression and rage and all those other things, it's hard to know where to go. And so I'm really happy to connect people with you in a Butterfly's Journey and Faces of Resilience, because this is a tool. This is an important tool. And also your grief work, grief recovery.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just 1 second. You did ask me about the book, and I just want to mention that.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, we're not doing it with just audio, but I have a book called Faces of Resilience.
Oh,
and
great.
it's on Amazon. And it has, just to show you, gives you an example of some of these people, and they're writing on their skin, and some of them are just, they blow your mind. Some of the, I had one mother who lost her son to overdose, and she just wrote on her arms, "No blame, no shame, just love."
Beautiful.
I just like certain ones like that, or "I choose not to be a victim," or "You're not lost, you're in my heart." I mean, these sayings that they come up with just blow my mind, and they just, I usually get to hug them. It's awesome.
That's beautiful. Well, and permission is a powerful thing. And I think that what this work does is that it gives other people permission to grieve in their own way and to have a vehicle for expression through photography, which already is so powerful. Beautifully lit, beautifully rendered. Let's talk a little bit about resilience, because whether or not we've experienced loss in our own immediate sphere, we all know somebody.
Oh,
and
yeah. We all experience it, loss.
We all experience it, and we're in an interesting time.
It's not just death, right? I mean, it's
well, no, it could be anything.
Loss of a relationship, loss of finance, loss of where you live or your health. There's lots of kinds of loss. I mean,
environment, nature. I mean, there's so much going on right now in the world. How does one begin the journey toward resilience? Because I'm sensing that there are a lot of people around the world, maybe who are listening to this podcast, who are feeling quite fragile right now and don't know how to be resilient. What's the first step?
Wow, that's a tough one, because I think it might be different for different people depending on what works for you. But there are so many things. I mean, I think one of the things that I think is most important is keeping an open mind about what might help and trying different things. So when I lost my son, I mean, I was an IBM exec. We didn't talk about spirituality. I was on quotas and deadlines, and I actually said to my boss at the time, "The worst thing in the world that could happen to me has. You therefore have no power over me anymore."
That's right.
I don't care about your deadlines and your quotas.
That's right.
I need to focus on surviving, and so again, my theater friends, I started to say before, they were the ones that didn't run, right? They would stay and listen to me, God bless them. And they introduced me to spirituality in this concept of my connection to the divine, whatever that was, right? Kind of outside of religion, right? Yeah. Whatever that was.
Yeah.
And everybody should do their own thing. So I did a lot of exploration and thinking about that. I had friends that taught me how to meditate, which really can just be deep breathing, just be quiet and breathe deeply. It's just get some quiet time and relax, because that's where I felt most connected to my son and my loved ones. Getting out in nature, walking in nature is so healing. I did a lot of walking on the beach, some in forests, journaling. I never kept a diary, but again, the universe provided. My remaining son, who was 19 at the time, and who was not a bookworm, right? He went into a bookstore and bought me a leather-bound refillable journal, and I'm thinking, really? And so because it was so unusual for him and he did that, I said, okay, I'm going to start using it. Well, it blew my mind how cathartic that was. And I started journaling and just let everything pour out, because the good, the bad, the ugly, nobody ever has to see it. It's so cathartic. It's another form of expression, right? To journal and let it all pour out. Well, 8 journals later, I wrote my first book, also called The Butterfly's Journey: Healing Grief After the Loss of a Child.
Wow.
So it was just, all those things are very healing. And then they started telling me about things like energy healing. And I'm like, what? What's that? And so I tried it and I thought, okay, this is kind of crazy, but it was amazing. I went to my friend, you might know him, Mark Clopton, in your report.
Mm.
Salzburg.
I've heard his name.
Yeah, because he's in theater. He manages the Newburyport acting.
Yep.
Um, anyway, so but in any case, so he's an amazing shaman and energy healer. And so I went to him, and it was about 9 months after my son died, and when my 30-year marriage was falling apart, and I didn't know what the heck to do. And I thought, I'm going to give it a try. Oh my God, I felt better. He released some energy blocks, and I felt better than I had since my son died. It's not a one-time thing. I went every 6 months for a couple of years at least. But just all these things, it's like keeping an open mind to things that you don't know. And since then, I think I've tried every type of energy healing imaginable, right? Reiki, acupuncture, polarity, reflexology.
The biggest breakthrough in wellness in the past 50 years. Vox Life's wearable technology has no batteries, no wires, and no metals. When neuroreceptors on your feet or arms come into contact with the Vox HPT pattern, a neuroresponse is triggered, sending information to your central nervous system, helping regulate pain, maintain motor control, and balance. The effect is immediate, so you focus less on weathering through physical pain and discomfort and more on living a happier, healthier life. As a special promotion, our sponsor is donating 25% of your purchases through the following link to benefit the Lost Travelers Club and our new Brain Candy Project wing. Simply visit https://losttravellersclub-braincandyproject.voxlife.com. That's VOXXlife.com. It's a win-win. Yeah, no, there's so many tools out there for healing. I'm now, September of this past year was the 13-year milestone for me since my son went, and he was here for 13 years as well.
I was just going to ask you that, because I'm thinking that's got to be a tough milestone when it becomes longer.
Well, and then it brings with it, the first holiday season, right, bringing me back to his early childhood and the magic of that time. And,
right.
There are things that will trigger us.
Sure.
I always wonder when I hear healing from grief. I don't expect that I will ever be healed from grief. Okay. I see there's a difference between mourning and grief. Mourning for me is a temporary state. It's that deep when it's fresh. I grew up in the Jewish faith, and we sit Shiva for a week after our loved one has deceased. And after that week of deliberate mourning, then you get on with grief. Then you get on with the rest of your life. And I think that grief is going to be there forever. It's that grief of missing them in the physical. But like you say, being open-minded to everything being possible, I think is key. I think you really nailed it there, because we are all brought up in a certain philosophy or religion or faith, and it teaches and preaches that this is the way. This is the only way. This is the truth, the only truth. Yeah. When human beings have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and however we sprung into the world, we're here now, and we haven't been around that long when you compare it to how long the earth has been around, or the plant kingdom, or the other animals, and and dinosaurs and all that. So I think that to take a half step back and gaze in wonder at the world around you, and then look in the mirror and gaze in wonder at yourself on the other side of loss. Yeah. That's my word for 2022, is wonder. Is really awesome. Staying connected to that state of wonder, because it is absolutely mind-blowing when I hear your story, when I look in the mirror and see my story and what I've survived, you know,
Yeah.
in my life, be it my son's loss
Mhm.
or cancer or my own cancer that I
Right.
survived, or, you know, major life shifts throughout my
Right.
life. We are resilient beings inherently, but each one of us individually has our own unique journey with that or toward that
Oh, absolutely.
resilience.
And grief, I think grief changes you,
Yep.
but for the most part, for the better. Because I got to tell you, it makes you kind of get it, right? It makes you understand crystal clear, for me anyway, what's important and what's not. And
Yeah.
I no longer waste time on things that I don't consider are important. I don't hang around negativity or negative people.
Right.
I don't spend any time on stuff that I think is pure BS,
Yes,
or
exactly.
just totally a waste of time. I just don't have any patience for it anymore. And it's made me absolutely a better person, a better listener, more compassionate.
Yep.
And as tough as it is to go through, there are those silver linings. And um, I'm careful about saying I don't ever stop grieving, because I don't want people not to have hope. And I really am good. I mean, I've lost both parents in addition to a husband and the kids and finances and a lot of other stuff. But I'm still optimistic. I'm still hopeful.
Yeah.
I feel mostly healed. Do I still miss the physical presence of them? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But but I just life can go on, can be good, and it is for the most part. You
When I
have ups
talk
and
about,
downs.
seriously, when I talk to friends and family about the gifts and the grief,
Yeah,
they're like, what? How can you lose a child
right.
and see it as a gift? I said, well, you have to be standing in my shoes,
Yeah,
because that becomes the measuring stick of what really matters
right.
after that.
Oh, yes.
And it changes, I mean, almost instantly. But once
Yeah,
once you emerge from the cloud of mourning,
yes.
right, and you start to say, not that we wish grief on anybody, that's not
No,
at all
never.
what we're saying,
I
nobody
think it's
should have to go through this, but if you find yourself
yeah,
in grief,
yeah,
right, good grief, I
yes.
call it, right, like Charlie Brown, good grief.
Yeah,
But
yeah, really.
there is good grief, there
I think
is
it's
that hope and that silver lining. And for me, and it seems like for you as well, a lot of it has been being open-minded
yeah,
to their existing tools that I've never been aware of before, whether
yes,
it's in energy healing or whether it's reconnecting to the natural world that we are part of, not separate from,
yeah.
um, or
Even
whether
therapy, being open-minded to things like that, talking about
therapy,
these things is
yes,
so
of any
healing.
kind,
Yeah,
and then we start to see what's possible. And for me, where I found it was in channeling my grief into service to
yeah.
others. We're very
Oh,
much
that's yeah.
alike in that sense,
Hmm.
because if I can show other people how I get through, and believe me, just like you, I have my days. I have
Yeah,
days where I do not want to get out from under the blanket. I have
yeah.
days where my body shuts down. I've been going through, I wanted to talk to you about this. I've been going through something recently,
Uh-huh.
and I've had it in varying degrees over the years, but I've been experiencing sleep paralysis.
Oh, what's that?
It's something that I've started looking into. It's not a dangerous thing, as far as I know, but it's where you're asleep, your body is asleep,
Mhm.
you're what they call lucid dreaming. You're in a dream, but you're aware that you're in a dream, and you're aware that you're asleep, but your eyes are closed and you're not awake. And you can't break out of that state of sleep. You're absolutely physically paralyzed, not mentally, not emotionally. I can be in the middle of a dream in a, Scottish castle somewhere and be totally aware that I'm dreaming and want to wake up, but I cannot. I lose complete control over my physical being.
Wow.
And at first it was really scary. because I was like, okay, my dog's got to pee. I'm going through the laundry list in my head of all the things I need to do. I've got a meeting at 4, I've got all this stuff to do. I
And
can't
remembering
wake
all
up.
this while you're sleeping.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
No,
amazing.
it's as awake as I am now, only it's inside.
Right.
And then eventually you wake up, something clicks you out of that state.
Huh.
But I have noticed that this sleep paralysis phenomenon comes at trigger points. Like it could be a birthday, or it could be the holidays, or it could be New Year's, it could be his day of passing, it could be, it's never random. It's always attached to some kind of a trigger. Do you go through anything like that, or have you heard of anything like that?
God, no, I haven't. I'm trying to think, I've had some dreams, and I personally believe sometimes, especially if I feel like there's a visitation, that's obviously a vivid dream is often a visitation.
Yeah. And you know the difference when you experience it.
Yes, yeah, it's hard to, but it's just, yeah, because it's so vivid.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually felt. I'm trying to think, 'cause I've never heard the term before, sleep paralysis. So I'm actually searching in my brain thinking, boy, have I experienced that and didn't know it, or didn't know what to call it.
Look it up. Look it up.
Yeah, no, I will. But no, I can remember being kind of locked in, or woken up, feeling like, oh my God, I really felt like I was in something like that. But I don't remember feeling so locked up like that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
People
And I've let it go. I've again, being open-minded, I just sort of embraced it now.
Yeah.
And because my life has a certain rhythm to it here, where I don't really have a lot of places I need to be in the moment, especially when we're on lockdown or in quarantine, I just let my body do what it needs to do. One thing that I've learned is that it may be a protection mode, because if you are in a depressive state or PTSD triggered, there's a potential, however small, of doing damage to yourself, or doing damage to someone else, or to property, or putting your fist through a glass window, or whatever. And it's your body's way of protecting you.
Wow.
By forcing you into paralysis.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like a visitation type dream.
No, because I've had those. My first one was 9 months after Cameron passed, and it was a gestation, if you think of birth, right? 9 months. And so I was always looking for it, asking him for it. Well, show up, please show up in my dream, send me a sign. He told me to look for cardinals as a sign that he was around before he passed. He whispered that to me, which I know now that it's a symbol for a lot of people. I had one tattooed on my heart.
Oh, cool.
The first and last thing I see every day in the mirror, whether or not I see one in nature, which in Europe I don't see them, but
I have a butterfly on my shoulder.
Yeah, right. For some people, it's a butterfly.
Kind of an international symbol of transition.
Yes, absolutely.
Transition to a life from with them to without them physically, and then a transition of life for them from a physical life to a spiritual life. And it's just such a major issue, symbol of transition in so many ways.
Shadow and Light, LLC was established by Dave Roberts and Reverend Patty Farino, co-authors of When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. Their mission is to empower individuals to transcend life challenges by integrating spiritual practices with psychology to achieve peace. They are available for individualized spiritual counseling, virtual or in-person presentations and workshops to universities, organizations, and other interested groups, virtual or in-person book club meetings. For further information, go to psychologyprofessorandminister.com. Well, and I think that conversation about transition, we're in a perpetual state of transition, human beings, aren't we? Unlike the rest of the animal kingdom, as far as we know, or other life forms on the planet, they are too in their way, but we get to be conscious of it. I don't know that my service dog Flat Stanley is aware of the transitions that he's gone through in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
or a tree, right? But I'm aware of it. And
But look at how dramatic the transition is of a butterfly, from a
yeah,
caterpillar to a pupa to a, in the chrysalis, and then to emerge into this unbelievably beautiful creature after coming from something so tiny and kind of ugly. It's just crazy. The symbolism of that, I think, blows my mind.
well, and
Anyway,
then we can find those symbols all throughout nature. We can
yeah,
look at the ocean and realize that we're merely a drop, right, in
yeah,
the ocean. And
yeah,
within that drop is contained a whole universe of
yeah,
life and being, right? So we can look to nature. That's why it's so important to get out into it as you can. If you're in a big city, or if you're in a desert or someplace where you don't have access to a forest or an ocean, um, find ways. When I was teaching in
yeah,
schools, I would take my kids, my city kids, my inner city kids,
yeah,
outside onto the pavement, onto the
yeah.
uh, lay them down, have them close their eyes, and listen for sounds of nature in the city.
Wow. Oh,
And
interesting.
that little gesture
Uh-huh.
opened them up to realizing what's around them. So there's always a way. There's
Yeah,
always a way. These visitations, I get them very often, and there it's like you're in it's a very real
yeah,
environment. It's
yeah,
like I'm sitting in my house, or I'm sitting in a hall somewhere, um and it feels real,
yeah.
and it's multi-sensory. The first time, that time with the cardinal, I could smell Cameron's hair.
Mm.
It was a visceral experience.
Wow.
I've had other
Yeah.
dreams, but dreams and visitations are very, very different in their quality, I think.
Yeah, what a gift. I mean, I know so many people that like they say, oh my God, but I want a sign so bad and I can't get one. But then I think we're talking sometimes about the difference in energy levels. If you believe in the difference in energy levels, love is very high, grief is very low, and it's difficult to connect. And I have actually several friends who are mediums,
Mhm.
and the people that can, kind of cross over and talk to the other side. And they'll say, I have to raise my vibration level, and the person I'm talking to has to lower theirs in order for us to be able to communicate. And when you're in deep grief or early grief, that gap is just too wide very often,
Yeah.
so that's why sometimes I think it takes time, and then sometimes people may not be looking for it. I tell people, please journal, write it down, find a little journal. Whenever you get a sign, write it down, because you are going to want to remember this 5 or 10 years from now.
Even
And
if you're not
someone,
sure, even if you're not sure if it's a
even if
sign,
you're not sure, absolutely, yeah.
trust your
and
gut.
and and it might, right, yeah, trust your gut, exactly. It might be a cardinal, it might be a butterfly, or it might be, I'm actually talking to somebody about writing a book about signs, because I've had several, but I know people that have had some that are, and the kind of book I want is things that you really can't refute, not just like butterflies and cardinals, but things
Right.
that are, I, I have a friend, a musician, who's, she's not a medium, but she has this gift of being able to talk to people on the other side. And so, I saw her actually, um, channel a song, and we were in my living room, and we were talking about my book and about her music, and she actually just went out and got her her keyboard from her car, and she channeled this, and I had this really emotional reaction to it. And it's like, what was that, and where did it come from? And she looked around the room. She had never met my son, and she picked out his picture and said, that's where it came from. And then when he realized she could understand him, and he used to do this with other people too, he would start giving her messages for me. And then one day when I had rented my house in the summer, and I was moving into the other place, I decided to take a walk before I unpacked. I get a message from her. It says, Brent says, be careful going up your front steps, Mom. Okay. All right. I'm walking back. The entire length of the step was cracked. If I had put my weight on the outside edge of it, I would have fallen and hurt myself.
Yeah.
So I want a book of signs like that. She had never been to the place. She had no idea,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
I'm
and talk
thinking,
to anybody who's been through any kind of grief process or loss. You're going to find those stories. I think
yeah,
I think, especially in some parts of the world or different cultures or different communities, people are taught from an early age not to speak of such things or to discount those things because they're a trick, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. But those of us that experience them, I've experienced them since I was a kid.
Right.
And even as an adult, I get messages all the time. Many of the times it's from outside of myself, right?
Yeah.
So I was in a store, for instance, one time, and the radio was playing overhead, and I'm not even really paying attention. And this woman comes around the corner, and she said, "Sorry to be so weird. You don't know me. I don't know you, but I just got a message from a young man who, like a teenager, and he's saying, 'Tell my papa that song was for him.'"
Oh.
And she didn't know my son called me Papa, right? That kind of a thing.
Oh, yeah.
But then also my teaching him as a parent, and this is the other side of it too, in terms of life skills,
Right.
those of us that are parents of young children, we can show them that this is part of our system. This is part of our way as human beings to be sensitive to these things. Case in point, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she's the one I go to for lost things. I'll ask her out loud, "Grandma, where are my keys?" And I'll hear her voice in my ear say, "Oh, they fell out of your coat pocket. They're under the sofa." Right?
Wow.
And I'll go, "There they are." One time Cameron was we had a 3-story townhouse in Minneapolis, and Cameron was up in his room, and he called down the stairs 3 stories, "Papa, would you ask great grandma where my book is?" I'm like, "No, you've got to cultivate your own relationship with her. Ask her, she'll tell you." And like 2 seconds later, "Found it." That kind of a thing.
Funny. Wow.
So again, that open-mindedness, and it's hard because with dogma and doctrine and being taught that this is the way and you don't color outside the lines, that make it difficult for some people. But I think in the privacy of your own space, we each of us have our own connection with what we call the spiritual world or the unseen forces outside of us.
Right.
That's the whole thrust of my theater company, by the way. It's exploring the liminal space, the threshold between the human physical and the human spiritual through theater.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And so I'm dealing with this on a daily basis through storytelling.
Yeah.
As you are through storytelling, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because so that song that I was telling you about, and then I met this same person on my son's, I call it Angelversary, his day of his passing, on his 10th Angelversary, and again she said, "Okay, I need a little more time. Can we meet half an hour later?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So when we got together, she had a poem she read. She said, "He dragged me out of the garden and made me channeled this music and then the lyrics, to this poem." And so I had her come into the studio when I did my book, and I did an audio book, and I had her record both of those songs. So they're free gifts on my website, by the way.
Wow.
And so one of them's an instrumental, the first one, and then the second one is one with lyrics that really speaks to, I think, bereaved parents. Not just me, it's addressed to me, but it really is for all of us, or even other people, other types of loss as well. But it's it just blows your mind, some of the stuff that comes through and how meaningful it is.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Johansson, and this is My Little House.
My Little House is an interactive, multisensory educational felt toy that I invented to help develop children's language skills.
I love My Little House.
I've been working as a speech therapist for over 20 years. So then I just thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just take this one-dimensional board and make it into an actual 3-dimensional toy? How cool would that be?
That's the idea behind My Little House. You can spread it out flat like a 4-panel felt board, or here's the cool part. In the blink of an eye, My Little House easily converts into a 3-dimensional reversible house. My Little House comes with 36 felt cutout pieces that match outlines in 8 colorful rooms. And they're felt, so they stick. Each piece inside My Little House has been placed with purpose.
But My Little House isn't just for kids on the spectrum or with significant disorders. It's also for typically developing 2 to 5-year-olds. It's a fun toy. I always say to my kids, when you get stuck, you have to ask for help. Can you tell me what you see on top of the refrigerator?
Apple.
I know that My Little House is going to make a difference in thousands of children's lives. I just need your help in getting it out there. Thank you so much for listening.
For more information about My Little House, My Little Farm, My Little Zoo, and other smart felt toys, visit www.smartfelttoys.com.
And keeping, you mentioned before about reaching out to help others.
Yeah.
When I wrote the book, it was 10 years after my son's death. And the last chapter is about the 3 most important things. And one was about trusting your gut and keeping an open mind again, and trying different things. Again, there's no magic bullet here, right? It's typically not one thing that's going to help you. It's multiple, but just keep an open mind. The second was helping others helps you heal. I mean, unbelievably.
Totally.
Just the appreciation and getting the focus off yourself. I don't know what it is exactly, but it absolutely works.
Ding.
And then I'm sorry, with my computer, right? And then I forgot. I muted my phone, but not my computer. There we go. Am I do that? Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay. And then the third was really that it's all about the love, and to focus on the love and the positive memories and all that kind of stuff. So
I have a question, not to change the subject, but I struggled for a long time with language around it, self-identity. I never resonated with the term bereaved parent because I'm not always bereft. That doesn't describe me, and I'm, an inherently happy person, and I know people who are bereft, who can really identify with that terminology, but I could not. And I was looking for language in every language around child loss and identity, a word like widow or orphan that I could turn to.
Yeah, no, there is none.
There's none. There's none, and I've looked all over, and the search continues.
There's no word for a bereaved, bereaved parent, but a parent
who's outlived their children. And I have a good story to tell you about how the Lost Travelers Club came to be. But I also want to talk a little bit about the difference in process and your experience, your vast experience in working with parents on the other side of child loss. The difference between fathers and mothers in their grief journey, because I see a very pronounced difference. That may be a whole other episode. But even if we can touch on it, it's been a really it's been a profound wake-up call for me. I think there's a great need in the world to address both in their different ways and find the common ground between them, because obviously it's there too.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
plenty of it. But yeah, talk a little bit about your perception and your not only your therapeutic work around grief, but also with the Compassionate Friends and so forth. What do you think?
Well, I mean, first of all, the grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss, right? You're not sick, you're not crazy, but yeah, men and women definitely react differently. Women tend to reach out more. They want to talk more. They tend to search for help more. I have both dads and moms, in my groups and stuff, but there's generally more women than men that are reaching out and looking for help. And again, generalization, I hate to generalize, but I know there's typically more anger with men after their loss, and sometimes a little more blame, depending on the situation. If there was somebody else involved, the anger and blame. Guilt and regret, I think, is spread probably pretty evenly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but they're just once you can get the men, especially talking and make a connection, then they really connect in. And then sometimes they're just, again, even more kind of loyal and helpful and you know, just want to do things to help and support outside of themselves, you know, just to, you know, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, one of the interesting things about the grief recovery method, because I looked, so basically my story, my son died in 2000, my older son died in 2002, the two babies before that. And in 2003, I started the Compassionate Friends of Greater Newburyport, Mass, which is that support group.
Yeah.
For lots of child, grandchild, or sibling. I still run support meetings and do a few events and things around that. But somewhere around then 2012, I wanted to do more. I put out my book in 2013 and started A Butterfly's Journey. And I was looking for a methodology. So, and something that really treated people as unique, you know, and wasn't religion based, you know, was non-denominational and all that. And I found this methodology written by a bereaved dad. And it was just, it's been, and then I got certified, and then I got an advanced certification, but it's been proven over 40 years on 6 continents. And it's been used in all different kinds of grief. And it's really interesting because it's got tools. It's succinct, right? It's 7 weeks one-on-one or 8 weeks in a group. So it's not endless. And it allows everybody to really express themselves. And you go through these tools where you're talking about the myths of grief. You're talking about short-term energy relieving behaviors that you may or may not realize are related to grief, like drinking and overeating and retail therapy and things like that. And then it goes through it. You actually do a loss history graph of all of your losses. And then you pick one relationship. It may or may not be the one you thought when you started, like, you know, the primary loss, but you do a relationship graph with all the pluses and minuses in that relationship. From that, you actually extract recovery components, which are basically undelivered communications. So they're things like apologies, forgivenesses, and other emotional statements. And then you turn those into recovery components, and then you format them into a letter, which is basically completing the relationship, because you're getting to say all the things that you didn't get to say to that person before they died. And then it's witnessed. So I would witness them reading the letter and saying goodbye, not goodbye to the person, but goodbye to the grief and to all those feelings, right? I've delivered all that stuff. It's very powerful.
Wow.
And like I said, it's been evidence-based. I think the process was through Kent State University, and it was became evidence-based a couple of years ago. It's the only one in the world that's evidence-based. But again, it's simple, it's succinct, you can understand it, and everybody's unique, and it leaves, you know, allows everybody to be unique in their grief and their recovery.
Is there a book I can link to?
There's
or a website?
Well, there's the general website. Okay, again, I talk about it on my website of abutterfliesjourney.org, and they can connect me through that.
Yep.
There's a handbook. There's actually homework, and you know, like during these classes, you have to agree to kind of do the homework, read the book and do the homework, and it's the Grief Recovery Manual, and it's the Grief Recovery Institute that does it and certifies people in it. And that is, I think, griefrecoveryinstitute.com, I think.
Okay.
I don't remember if it's .com or .org, but
No,
anyway, it's powerful. And people, I think a couple of years ago, when I've been to a couple of their international conferences, and there were like a few years ago, 5,000 people all over the world doing this, you know, certified in it. Like I said, I went back and got an advanced certification so that I could do it internationally and online,
right.
You know, with anybody, anywhere, through Zoom or phone or, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's fantastic. And again, it's another tool.
Yes.
And it's tried and true. And I think that's sometimes, especially in smaller communities or people who don't have access to resources, we always think in terms of, you know, we have the internet, we have Zoom, we have everything, Google and all that. But there are so many communities around the world that don't have internet access, who don't have access to resources to deal with this or to expand their skill levels.
Yes.
And so if you are any of our listeners in a country or in a community where these resources may not be available at large, this is an opportunity for you to bring them out into your own community, to empower yourself, to be a helper in the world, to channel your grief into service to other people who are also experiencing grief in their own way, but maybe with some limited skill and some limited resources. One of the things that really hit me, when you met me, I had the Brain Candy Project, which was a support system for parents who were living in hospital with their critically ill kids. Many of them were far away from home because they were looking for the best care to save their children. And so they didn't have any community around them, nobody to bring them wholesome food or clean clothes or nail clippers or little things you don't even think about when you're embedded in the hospital with your child. And so the Brain Candy Project, which my son and I created together while he was still here, was a way to bridge the gap and to welcome families who are going through a critical time with their children into our community, to say, while you are here, you are family, and whatever you need, we will provide for you. And so it wasn't financial. It was comfort items. It was things to get you through your day. It was a bar of soap that didn't smell like formaldehyde, or it was, a comfy robe or a hoodie or something, right? We called it a candy box. So after Cameron passed and I got on with my life and I was no longer in the hospital experience, the Brain Candy Project was sort of in a holding pattern for a long, long time. I had a really hard time finding volunteers to help carry the burden of it. In terms of promotion and hospital communications and things like that. It was all me. And it was overwhelming. It was too much, especially since I wasn't in that world. I was on the other side of it. Stories are at the very heart of what makes us human. We each have one, and we can learn and grow from listening to each other. The Listen podcast is an exploration of the stories of Americans abroad and how they got there. If you're curious about the world and hungry for community, check out their website at www.thelistenpodcast.com or their Facebook group at the Listen Podcast Community. And so fast forward to a couple of years ago when I was in England, and after 3 months, I had to leave the borders of the United Kingdom for a minute, and then I could come back for another 3 months.
Right.
And so as a tourist. And so I went to Belgium.
Yeah.
A little bit about this before.
Talk about that. I love Belgium. Yeah.
I loved Belgium. I had never been there. And I thought, okay, where can I go for a long weekend holiday? And just, so I went to the Belgian coast, this little town, this little coastal resort town called Blankenberg. About a 50-minute train ride from Bruges. And if you've not been to Bruges, go to Bruges.
I know. I really
magical.
On my bucket list, I've always wanted to go to Bruges, and I didn't get there when I was in Belgium. But I loved Belgium. Yeah.
All right. Next time you come to Europe and I'm free to travel, then we'll go. We'll go to Bruges.
Deal. Deal.
So I was I got on the train in London and went to Brussels, and then I had to switch trains in Brussels to go to the coast. Except they put me on the wrong train. They gave me the wrong information, and I ended up almost to Germany on the other side of the country from where I wanted to be. And so I got off the train in this village and I said, "Where's Blankenberg?" "Oh, Blankenberg's way on the other side of the country." I said, "Well, is there a train from here to Blankenberg? Because I have a reservation and I'm tired. I've been traveling all day. I want to get there." And said, "No, you have to go back to Brussels, switch trains again." So I ended up getting back to Blankenberg around 11 p.m. But when I got to Brussels, I went.
Best Belgium is. Shows you how small the country is. If you
Yeah,
call that-
exactly. It was tiny. And so I got back to Brussels to switch trains. I went to the ticketing agent. I told her the story. And she leans back in her chair and with this sort of Marlene Dietrich accent, she says, you are a lost traveler.
Oh,
And something hit me in my solar plexus.
oh,
And
that's
I almost started crying
wow.
because we were talking about there not being language around child loss. That's precisely how it feels to me. After
Wow.
child loss, you feel like you are a lost traveler. You
Oh,
feel like your destination is unclear, or you've been set on a different path than you expected.
yeah.
And I still get a little verklempt over it because it is so accurate. It is so
Yeah,
pinpoint accurate
really?
to the journey
Wow.
of child loss. So I was holding that, and I got to Blankenberg, and the next couple days just sort of, walked around, and then I took the train to Bruges. And I got on the train, and there was a group of women, younger than me, most of them. I'm in my mid-50s, and I think the eldest was probably around my age or a little older. And they were having a grand old time. They were laughing and cackling in some language I had never heard. And I was just delighted at this energy that they were putting off. And so we got off the train in Bruges, and they all crowded around me because they wanted to know about my service dog, Flat Stanley. In Europe, they call them assistance dogs. What is an assistance dog? And so I was telling them, that I experienced child loss, and I have, some post-traumatic stress and all of that. He really helps with that. I'm also physically disabled. I have nerve damage in my leg, and he helps me with balance and so forth. And I said, and tell me about your group. Are you just a group of friends on holiday? And they said, no, we're from Holland, which is why I didn't understand the language. And we are a travel group, and we call ourselves colegas. I said, oh, you work together? Because I'm thinking colleagues, right? I'm trying to equate.
Okay, right.
And she said, no, we're all young widows.
Oh, interesting.
And
Okay.
we called ourselves colegas to throw people off the scent, because when we were trying to book events or concerts or restaurants or hotels even, and we would tell people what our group was, nobody would want anything to do with us because they would think that we would show up in black and be morose and depressed.
Oh, wow.
Nobody wanted to be around a group of widows, right? And there are men in the group as well, just not on this trip, but in the organization, the nonprofit
Right.
we have called Colegas, there are men and women, but this was a particularly just a group of women. I said, wow, that's fascinating. I said, what's the idea behind it? They said, well, we have all met grief younger than we expected to with our partners.
Okay.
And with this travel group, we have found a way to find community and to step back out into the world in a powerful but fun way amongst people who get it, who understand this journey. We don't have to explain to anyone what it means.
Wow.
This
Okay, that's
group.
great.
And if somebody needs to spend the day sleeping in their hotel, we get it. We understand. If they want to go out by themselves, or if they want to come out with a group and go to the disco, then great, But there was that sense of awareness, that sense of understanding amongst this group or these groups. And I was walking around Bruges all day thinking about these women, thinking about this idea of a travel group.
Powerful.
And then it dawned on me, the Lost Travelers Club. Everyone's always saying that child loss is a club that nobody should belong to or nobody wants
right,
to belong to,
right.
right? We hear that phrase all the time. Well, guess
Yes.
what? Now we have a club.
Wow.
Now we have a club. And
That's
of
interesting.
course,
I hit
now
the
with
wrong link, I
the-
think. I think I typed it rather than clicking your link, and I hit the wrong thing. So that comment I made earlier to you was off. Because I think I was looking at the wrong thing, and I was still
maybe.
wondering what it was.
Interesting.
Okay, now it's making
Okay.
sense. All right.
Yeah,
now
if you go, it's in the
Awesome.
description, losttravelers.club is the website.
Okay. No,
And
I didn't put the .club. That's the problem. Okay.
oh, okay. And so all the proceeds from sponsorship of the Lost Traveler podcast go to support the Lost Traveler Club. Now, with the pandemic, that put the kibosh on the idea of a travel club because we're all very limited in how we can travel in the world right now, and especially in groups. And so what it's sort of, as we're waiting for the world to open up again, what we are doing, I have a blog there on the website, and there's also a group, a private group on Facebook for parents who have outlived their kids, and there is a Lost Travelers Club Facebook page, and for the podcast, we're on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. So, but the idea of it was well met when I first started doing some field research, and my fiscal sponsor for the Brain Candy Project, United Charitable, under which I operate as a nonprofit, I called them when I got back to Blankenberg, and I said, what would it take for me to change the organization from the Brain Candy Project to the Lost Travelers Club? They said, just A, B, and C, and all the funds that are in the Brain Candy Project coffers will transfer over to the Lost Travelers Club. Just send us your new website, send us all this and that. And it was seamless and beautiful. And then one day I got a message on Facebook from somebody I never met before, a young woman, 19 years old. So we're essentially a kid still. And she asked me a simple question. I don't know how she found me, but she asked me to send her a sketchbook, if I would send her a sketchbook. And as I started chatting with her, I discovered that not only had she lost her leg when she was 8 years old, but she, in the last 10 years, has had numerous brain tumors and brain surgeries, and they've affected her eyes and her physicality. And then I think 3 years ago, she lost her mother on top of all of that.
Oh, wow.
Right. And a young person going through physical, life-threatening health challenges anyway, to go through the loss of a parent on top of that, who's your caregiver, your main go-to, your source, your rock. I was like, I've got to help this kid. She has nothing. Her father was a disabled vet on very limited income. And so for some reason, Providence sent her my way. And I said, listen, I'm in Europe, I'm in Spain. I don't know what I can do from my end here. And after the conversation, a light went off in my head to bring back the Brain Candy Project.
Oh, okay.
And the concept of a candy box. But now, instead of providing support goods for parents living in hospitals, we can provide art supplies for young people who are still struggling for their lives and going through a hard or terminal illness.
Wow.
And so, so I sent her, without her knowing it, I sent her a $200 candy box full of art supplies, paints, and I sent her, I think, 9 sketchbooks and watercolors and different kinds of pencils, different kinds of it was just a deluxe art kit, because these kids they need self-expression, they need a channel, like you're talking about journaling. She's also a writer, and part of this whole Brain Candy vision, Cameron's side of it, was a magazine to be called Brain Candy, to be written by and for young people who are living with critical or terminal illness, as a way for them to bridge to one another and form community and not feel alone in the world. And so, you know, everything that we're doing to bridge people in their experience, I think, is so profoundly important, especially now. Maybe now more than ever, because we're dealing with loss and grief in a way that our generation certainly hasn't seen, maybe since a world war, on that level of loss, of parents, of children. I just lost my father in October to COVID.
Sorry.
And so, so it brings up a lot. And I value this conversation with you, and I want to have more conversations with you. Definitely have you back as a guest, because we're just scratching the surface, aren't we?
Yeah, true. A lot of stuff related to this and affected by this, and especially with everything going on in the world right now. But yeah, we've always been able, it's funny, we hit it off right away when we first, I'm trying to remember how we actually connected or why, but I remember calling you and drove to Gloucester and met you, and yeah, we always hit it off. We've always been able to talk easily, and I don't even remember exactly what the catalyst was.
I don't either. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, that's funny.
I don't know. It was just meant to be. And sometimes people, go off on their path, and sometimes the paths reconnect. I'm finding that a lot right now. I'm reconnecting with a lot of old friends, and in more profound ways than when we first met. So
yeah,
I definitely feel that way here. The last thing I always ask my guests at the end, and I know you've offered a lot of practical tools already in this episode, but off the top of your head, either reiterating or maybe something we haven't talked about yet in terms of our listenership around the world, 31 countries and growing.
Wow.
What are 3 practical tools that anyone universally around the world, no matter what culture they're in and no matter where they're listening, what can they take away from this conversation, or introduce something we haven't yet in the conversation? Practical tools that they can apply to their journey.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, one of the I know you're going to put my site, I won't bother mentioning that again. You're going to put it on. But I know another really profound and expansive resource center is opentohope.com. And it was founded by Gloria and Heidi Horsley, both a mother-daughter psychologists who Gloria lost her son and her husband, and Heidi lost her brother. But they have people, I think, all over the world that do articles and videos, and there's lots of great resources.
Wonderful.
God, there's so many different organizations. The Compassionate Friends is in 30 countries.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they were founded in the UK, and then they came to the US, and in the US, they're the largest grief organization in the world. And that was for families that have lost a child, grandchild, or sibling, but it's compassionatefriends.org. And I think there's 600 or 700 chapters in the US. And I don't know like I said, they're in 30 countries, but you could go out there and find, and the one in London is the one, probably the base of the European one, but there's several countries, and they just have a lot of resources online as well as in person, meetings, and it's all volunteer. It's a all volunteer group, and all free. And then, let me see. Well, I guess, again, just to reiterate, the Grief Recovery Institute, which is is it Grief Recovery? Oh God, I should know this.
I'll look it up. I'll put it in the description.
Right, yeah, okay. Grief Recovery Institute, and again, and a lot of that, and then connects into mine as well, because I've got the resource center, the free resource center, which is a butterfliesjourney.org.
Great.
Yeah,
great. There's so much out there. There's so much out there. I wish there were a way to reach people in communities where they may not have resources, or be aware that there are international resources available to them. So if you're listening and you are on a grief journey, whether it's a parent or a child or a friend or your parakeet, there's help out there. And I think from Dr. Hopkinson and I, we have a similar message, that you're not alone. Nobody is alone. And I hope that this episode has inspired you. It's certainly inspired me, and it's inspired me to want to collaborate with you more. And thank you for your time and your energy, and in the face of all that you have dealt with, all the resilience that you have managed to armor yourself with, and still remain open-hearted and genuine and sensitive and kind. It's a much needed energy in this world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you for all the work you do and for inviting me to your podcast. And it's been so nice reconnecting with you as well. I'd love to find more ways to collaborate.
We'll do it. Happy New Year.
Yes, absolutely. Happy New Year. This is great. Thank you. And then just let me know how you want to, if there's a flyer or whatever, and then so I'll promote when you're gonna put the podcast out and that kind of thing. And yeah, and if you see opportunities to do kind of gatherings or photo shoots in Europe as you go through your stuff, I would love to find a way. And sometimes we need some help with covering expenses, but I just would love to do more of these Faces of Resilience to allow people to express themselves about all kinds of
well, like we said, permission is a powerful thing. And if somebody expresses interest in how you feel or how you've managed to survive loss, right?
Yeah.
And writing it on your body,
Yeah.
that's such an act of empowerment. So I'm really excited about that. You've been listening to Season 2 of the Lost Traveler Podcast with Henry Cameron Allen. Visit me online at www.henryallen.org. Thank you to my guests, and thank you for tuning in. Let's keep striving for a better world together.